Hello, everybody. Today we're going to do a hands-on review with a very interesting lens. This is the 500mm F5.6 Sigma sports lens, and we have been using this lens for probably a few months now, 3-4 months. And I'm joined by Matan Sharon.
Hey, do.
Hello, Matan. A wildlife and nature photographer. This is the second time that you're here. You help us with the 50mm Sigma review.
True, yeah.
That was a couple of months ago, and now we are testing the 500. So we 10 times the the previous one, but that's a very interesting review. And I want to start actually with something that basically it's a bit of a background about this lens. Some of it is actually personal because I've been waiting for a lens just like this for, I would say, almost 10 years. And the point is this. By the way, if you want to jump into the review itself, I'll have the timestamp below. You can jump to the actual review, but I think it's important to give some background to this lens. So back to what I was saying. I was waiting for this lens for a long, long time. Basically, since Nikon released if you remember, the 500mm f5.6 PF lens.
Mm-hmm.
I think the middle of last decade, something like that,
Mhm.
2015, 16, I don't know. But they had the 500mm 5.6 PF, which is a very light lens.
Mhm.
It's still selling, although they announced they now have a full family of
They have
PF.
a new PF line.
Yeah, exactly. So they have the original 500mm PF was a DSLR lens, so basically an F mount. But the new one, the 600 F6.3, I think the PF is, I'm not even sure if it's in the name, but it's a PF lens.
Mhm.
It's a slightly different lens, but it's a Z mount.
Yeah, Zima.
And they have the 800mm, and I'm not sure if they have another lens. Maybe, do they have the 300mm in a Z mount? Do you remember?
No.
No. Okay. So it's still
a
an
PF
F.
line? No.
I think, but they did have it. I think originally they had a
Not a
three,
new, not a Z mount.
not a Z mount,
No,
exactly.
Z-
Yeah.
no,
So they didn't release. Maybe they will. But so they have a pretty substantial line, and you can still use the F mount with an adapter, and I think it works pretty well. I don't know. I didn't test it, but so ever since they released that, I've been using Sony at the time. So just starting. Again, we're talking 10 years ago, and Sony didn't have anything comparable. And actually, if you're looking at Canon, they also don't have anything comparable.
Sony still doesn't have anything.
Exactly. So if you're looking, let's say, if you're looking at Canon, so for the RF mount, they have what, 600? I don't remember.
The 100 to 500.
Yeah, which is an interesting lens, but it's not a prime.
RF, yeah.
And if you're looking at Sony, so the Sony has the 600, the 400, both of them you had, or you still have the 600, which we tested. You sold your 400 recently.
Yes.
And you have the basically 100 to 400 if you're talking zooms, and 200 to 600, which you don't have. I played with it a little bit, and now there is the new 300.
Yeah,
which you order it.
Yeah.
You ordered it, so that will be interesting to play around with when you get it.
Yeah.
So you can, for the 300, you can actually use either a 1.4 extender or a 2-time extender, and then get a 600 what 600.
300 on the 600. And
No, the F is it's a 2.8 lens, so
Yeah.
it will be what
6.3.
5.6, no?
Yeah, you lose 2 stops.
2 stops, so 5.6. Okay, so that can be an interesting test. It depends on how good the lens itself is. I think I saw at least one review which looked at the 300 with a 2-time extender, and it looked very good.
Yeah, actually works good on the 300.
Yeah, because most lenses, you need a very, very sharp lens with a fantastic autofocus to not, deteriorate.
Yeah, when I use the 2x teleconverter on my 600, then sometimes I'm missing shots, not too much, but
The
you do
autofocus
feel some
or-
kind of softness to the photo.
Yeah.
The 1.4 is...
No, the 1.4 is fantastic. It would be interesting if Sony will ever come up with a 1.7 teleconverter.
I don't think you can use teleconverter on third-party lenses.
No, exactly. So that's something that we're going to talk about. So you can, on an L mount, if you're using this like an L mount version of this, because there is, you can use, but we'll get to that. Okay, so the background. So we talked about what was and what is currently available from other manufacturers. But again, there is no Sony. If you want a lightweight, relatively inexpensive prime lens, you don't have an option for Sony. Not from Sony itself, and not really from any third-party manufacturer.
No.
So it's either going like super high end with either the 600 or the 400 mm teleconverter, which is, and the two of them are very expensive and very heavy, like relatively speaking.
The lightest in the.
That's true, but compared to this one,
Yeah, it's not in the same
yeah,
category. But
we'll talk about this. This is much, much lighter. Actually, the 300 is about the same weight as this, which is a fantastic thing for Sony because it's a 2.8 lens.
And slightly larger.
It's a bit longer, just a bit, 3 centimeters, I think, longer, 1.5 inches or something like that. But yeah, but it's a very different lens, and yeah. So that's the reasoning behind why I was waiting for such a long time for this lens. And the big question mark is how the autofocus is, because we have seen that Sigma with their high-end lenses. This is the sports lens, the lens from the sports series. The 50mm that we looked at was an art lens, but I don't think that it matters. Both of them are like considered the high-end.
Yeah, so I took it out with me to the field. I used it to try to photograph a few animals, some birds in flight and just perching, and also fox. I saw some foxes. I saw some raptors too. While shooting birds in flight, I did miss shots. When I was photographing the fox, I had a moment that a crow came in, just flew over the fox, and I missed focus on that. I think out of a burst, I only got 2 images in focus. But when I was shooting people, and when we did the test, when I was taking photos of you running and anything like larger size, I didn't even miss one shot.
I'm thinking, and I think that when you used it, I think you took my A1 and maybe the settings were not. Did you use my A1 or your A1?
I had it on both.
Really?
I had it for like I had it for like 5 days, and I took it out a couple of times, more than once.
And you notice any difference between when you were using it on your camera with your settings than my camera with my settings? Because I at the time, my A1 is usually used here in the studio.
I noticed differences of the way the autofocus functions in different light situations, and in low lights it doesn't perform as good, but when the light is just good or maybe not good for me,
it's a slower lens,
more
obviously.
harsh, the autofocus does better on in the middle of the day. I don't shoot much in the middle of the day outside. I mostly shoot in low light situation, before sunrise, during sunrise. So it functions a little better in good light, and when taking photos of people.
Yeah. Well, obviously that's
larger objects.
Yeah, that's not really a lens for people. That's a bird, wildlife, whatever. That's what you do.
No, I think this lens is very usable for sport, bikes, cars, soccer, football. Any kinds of sports. It's very good, and it means a lot when you don't miss focus.
Yeah.
Your bursts are less photos. You're limited.
This is an important point. This is something that we talked about in the 50, and we talked about way like in previous lens reviews. Sony restricts third-party speed to 15 frames per second for whatever reason, probably a marketing reason, but they will never say it. But that's a restriction that you have to remember if you're using it on an A1, on A9. I
would like to take it to a racetrack one day and see how it performs with the motorcycles and vehicles and things like that.
Yeah, we didn't do this test.
With people, it does good.
Yeah.
Birds, even in ideal distance, I still missed some shots.
Yeah. But okay.
I have to say that it was a low light situation.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go into the actual review. I did some of our regular tests. This is basically a hands-on we call it a hands-on review or a talk review. So we include everything that we do normally for a lens review, but we also wanted another perspective, so we bought Matan. So let's talk about optical design. This lens has a pretty complex optical design with like 20 elements and 14 groups, including 3 FLD elements and 2 SLD elements. That's straight up specs.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of materials, I kind of like it. It's, I think, made out of magnesium and something called TSC. It's basically a composite material.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of nice. It feels pretty robust. I don't know, when you compare it to your 600 millimeter, what do you think in terms of just the composite material, not anything else?
Well, you can't. I just like it. I just like the design of it. I like how small it is.
Yeah.
And it feels robust. It's sturdy. The screws on it are pretty good.
Yeah.
It's very small, very light for what
But
it
you
is.
find the starting part strange?
Yeah, this part is a little longer, which
Yeah.
looks kind of funny.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, it's stable. I had it on
I
all
would
my
say-
setups. The
yeah.
only thing I can say here, when we talk about it, is that the foot.
Yeah,
is
we'll talk about the
very,
foot, the
short.
length of the foot. Yeah.
The foot is very short.
Did you notice that the balance, at least on the A1, is not? It's a little front heavy. That's my feeling. You used to, yeah.
I used to all
The 600 is the 600 is a lot. Like how front heavy is it?
Actually, I don't feel it too much as front heavy. Sometimes
Okay.
I even feel like weight on the back, but I have the
really?
battery extenders and everything.
From what I understand, the 300 is like really nicely balanced. We'll test it when you get it. but
Sony
yeah.
did a good job with
Yeah.
this line, but I think also this specific lens here, it's very easy to use, operate.
Yeah.
You have, of course, you have all the buttons here to, what we're going to talk about it now.
We will talk about the buttons and switches in a moment, but yeah. And in terms of like weight, this is just under 1.4 kilograms.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic.
great.
If you compare, do you remember what's your 600 millimeter, how much it weighs? I think 3 kilograms or just under 3?
3.2 or 2.7.
So, okay. So about twice as much, basically. That's a huge difference. Yeah, it's a different lens again.
It's not in the same category.
Yeah, but still, I mean, if in terms of the reach, they're fairly close. And
I would say this lens, even for nature, wildlife photographers, and sports photographers, I think this Sigma lens can be very good for beginners.
I wouldn't say beginners. It's a $3,000 lens.
No, not beginners. My meaning is that people that want to get into into shooting animals with this lens.
I'd say people who don't make their living out of, like you, who make their living out of shooting wildlife and animals and birds.
But in the sport photography, I think
it can be a completely professional
lens for sure.
Yeah. Again, we didn't test it at this.
I've just seen how it functions with the people.
Yeah, that's
functions really good with people.
Yeah. Now, again, in terms of size, so we said a little under 1.4 kilograms. I think it's 48 ounces or something like that, and 23 centimeters or 9-inch without the hood. It has a pretty long hood, but it's not huge. So that's that. We will show. I think we took a picture of comparing it to both the 100 to 400 and the 600. So that was an interesting like size comparison.
Yeah.
That was pretty nice. In terms of rings, I actually really like it has 2 rings, obviously. So it has the focus and the aperture. The aperture, you probably have, I think, the same thing on the 600. It has a lock for like you can lock the aperture on A mode.
I don't have aperture ring.
You don't? On the 600, you don't have an aperture ring? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't notice that. Okay, so here you do have one which is fairly thin. You can change it to a click and declick mode. So if you don't have, you don't have, and you can lock it in A mode, so it won't move by accident. So that's pretty nice. And you have we'll talk about the buttons, but you have 3 programmable buttons on 3.
Can you
Three,
program
yeah.
each one of them to a different program, or they
No,
all do
that's
the
as far
same?
as I know, that's true for all Sony lenses
Uh-huh.
and third-party Sony lens or E-mount lenses.
Mhm.
It's all the same. It
Yeah.
would be really nice if you could.
Yeah.
That would be pretty great. So that's in terms of the rings. I like the friction on the large ring. I think it's pretty good. The aperture, well, it depends on, I don't think that you're going to use, most people are probably not going to use the aperture that much on this. This is why it's so small.
Yeah,
uh,
it's in video maybe,
yeah,
but not.
for my small hands, I know you have much bigger hands. For my small hands, the ring itself is a little bit too far, but again, it depends on the size of your hands. For me, it's like a little bit,
Far back.
it's far no,
Front.
forward, yeah.
Mm.
But again, if you have larger hands, I don't think it's a problem. You can play with it, but you actually need a camera to really feel that. So that's in terms of the rings. Let's talk buttons and switches. It has basically everything that you can imagine. So it has, I wrote down, it has the autofocus manual focus switch. It has a three focus limiter with three modes. So you have full, 10 meters to infinity, and 3.2 meters, which is the minimum focus distance, to 10 meters. So that's nice. You have image stabilization with, again, three modes. So you have off, you have one, which is like the general one, and you have two for motorsports. We talked about motorsports. So that can be pretty
That's
nice.
2 modes, not 3 modes.
No, the off. Well,
Yeah.
okay. You can switch the switch to three modes. So that's that. And you have something great, but you can't use it on the Sony version of this lens, which is like a custom mode. So on the L mount, I know exactly what you can change, but you can somehow program the C1 and C2 to different things. Maybe like what
Nice.
you have on the camera. I don't know. So just more buttons, but on the Sony, again, it doesn't do anything, so it's always off. So besides that, we mentioned that it has a lock, so you can lock it, the aperture on A mode, and you can declick and click, and you have the three programmable buttons. So I know, can you think about something that this is missing?
No, it has everything that
Everything that I can think of. So yeah, that's that. In terms of sealing, I looked at I didn't use it in the rain. We're the summer now, so if you would be using it in the winter, you probably.
I didn't get a chance to actually use it in the rain. I always use in the rain.
Yeah. Well, depending on the season,
but I think
where
it's
you
supposed
are.
to be sealed, right?
Yeah, it's completely sealed, and it has something interesting that they wrote. It's both dust and splash resistant, and the structure has special water and oil repelling coating.
Yeah, that's how it feels. That's what I wanted to say. That feels like some of those water repelling.
The Sony doesn't have this,
coating.
right?
I think they do.
They do? Okay. The mount, we talked about the mount. So this is an E, and there is also an L mount. And the difference is, again, this is restricted to 15 frames per second. And you can't use extenders. Well, you can on the L mount. Again, I'm not sure which is the fastest L mount, but probably not 100 frames per second or even 30.
Well, maybe what I would like to see is, especially if they don't let you use a Sony extender, is to maybe see lenses like that with a built-in extender.
That could be interesting.
And that would be great feature to this kind of lenses.
I agree. I would also like Sony to come up with something like that. I think that Canon has one right now.
Nikon has them built-in extenders, the 400 2.8.
Canon released something like that?
I'm not sure about Canon.
Okay. But so that's in terms of the mount. The hood is, I don't know, I'll write down what's the length of the hood, but it's kind of nice. It has like a rubber coating on the front, which is always good if you like putting it on a table. That's great. So that's nice, and it's very easy to open and close. It has this lock on the side. So that's the hood. It has 11 aperture blades. We'll see. I did a test with a Bokeh later on. I think the Bokeh is interesting, but we'll talk about it. The filter, the 600 doesn't have a filter. So I mean, it's a drop-in back filter. Did you ever use that?
The drop-in, some polarizer in there.
No. You have a polarizer for the.
But never really. I don't need it.
Which Sony? A Sony polarizer? Aren't there like third-party ones? Or
Never really looked into it, to be honest.
okay, so that's that. So here you have a 95 millimeter. It's a huge
Big.
like chunk of glass in the front.
Hmm.
It's good because it's, I think, easier to find. It's still expensive. I mean, but you never use like front filters, right?
On the 600?
No, on any lens. No,
Oh
600
yeah,
you can't.
I use.
No, I'm talking specifically like protection filters.
No, I don't use on my.
Yeah, I use protection filters on all my glass. It's I know I'm paranoid, so I always like to use them. But on this lens in particular, I mean, even if you're just cleaning and you clean too hard and you somehow scratched it or whatever,
Yeah.
it's better to scratch not a polarizer, a filter than
UV filter.
yeah. So that's that. So let's talk about performance. And the first thing is focusing. Now, we did all sorts of, we talked about it. I looked, first of all, I did like a quick test in the studio. It's very fast, it's silent. By the way, the 600 is not really silent. You do hear it, the autofocus sometimes, right?
I never noticed that until today.
Yeah, so I know.
This thing has two motors in there.
Yeah, it's gigantic. But this one is really silent. It focuses very, very quickly. So not really a problem like in normal situations. I think it has like something called Sigma calls HLA, which is like how they. It's basically a linear motor, so that's it's. I think it's new for this lens, as far as I know, and it's really fast. So that's great. But the big question is really not the speed or the audible or the audio level of the like how noisy it is, but how accurate the autofocus is. And that was the big question that we want to answer. So you already touched upon this. We did a test outdoors, me running towards the lens. We did it a couple of times with the same camera, the same settings, A1. Obviously, the difference is the difference in the number of pictures. We did it compared to the 100 to 400. It's not exactly apples to apples because there isn't a comparable lens, but I'll mention, we didn't even have a chance to, we did it just before this talk, but I'll mention in the comment, not in the comments, on the video, how many shots we got like sharp. But from the look of it, I think both of them did very well.
Yeah, so I didn't miss focus. I think I had
maybe once.
Yeah,
and with the 100 to 400.
Some of the photos with the Sigma 500, the focus it didn't stay locked on your eye. Maybe it went down to your chin or something, but it was there. You're in focus. Some of them are looking a little bit soft, which with the 100 to 400, the entire burst was in your eye, and no softness.
Okay, so I'll have to go over it and write some notes on the article and maybe on the video as well. So that's in terms of like focusing. The lens doesn't have the option for repeatable focus. So that's unfortunate, but that's true for, as far as I know. I'm not sure if all Sony lenses. I know that on the L version, you have an option, I think not in the lens, in the camera, to do it's called linear or not. I forgot the name, but I'll put it on the screen. But to be able to, it doesn't matter the speed in which you turn the manual focus, you will always return to the same position. It's very important if you're using like full focus and stuff like that. So
you have camera settings for that.
Yeah, but Sony doesn't allow this, as far as I know. So it is what it is. But so not on the Sony, probably on some at least L bodies. In terms of image stabilization, Anno, did you play with it?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think?
Everything was great.
Yeah. I wasn't able to like.
I changed the modes. I tried the.
Yeah, I didn't do a lot of. You have two modes. You have the regular and panning.
Yeah.
I didn't use the panning, to be honest, that much. The regular one seems to work very well. You see a lot of like reduction in shakiness in the viewfinder when you look. If you're looking at the screen, not that much, but in the viewfinder, you can really see it. Again, doing like manual hand holding and seeing how low you can go in terms of like the speed. I'm not very good at that because I'm not that stable. So I'm not the right person to do this type of testing. But
no, so like I said, I shot with it in low light. So I had
But
to.
do you remember which speed you were
I think
at?
I was at shutter speed below 500, below 600.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, that's it.
So,
We just did a sharpness test. Again, we did it just before we started, so we didn't have a chance to look. But from very superficial looking, just in the camera, it looks that it's a very sharp lens. And we compare
yeah.
it to the 100 to 400, and I think also we did the 600.
Yeah.
The length of the studio here is 17 meters. That's a very long distance, and it was still not enough.
Yeah, we
So
couldn't cover.
yeah,
Yeah,
so that's we did what we could. So I'll put it on the screen and you can see the differences. I did a close-up sharpness distance. It can go up to 3.2. Actually, in my test, it can go, if you're in manual focus, you can go down to about 3 meters 5 centimeters, something like that, like a little closer. It's something like that with some lenses where you can go closer when you're in manual focus. So and the sharpness is fantastic, like across the
Yeah.
frame. That's very good, but it's not very close. It's not a lens for close-up work. If you want close-up work, get 100 to 400, something like that. A zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a much better option. In terms of breathing, I did a breathing test. Not fantastic. I wouldn't use it for like video where breathing is important.
Really?
But I'm not that surprised about it. And obviously, I mean,
Or
I'm not sure if the 600. You probably don't know if the 600 is included in the breathing compensation of the.
Yes, it
It
is.
is. Okay, so that's a point for the Sony. Chromatic aberrations. I didn't see any chromatic aberrations in our test. Did you see in the pictures that you took any chromatic aberrations? Okay,
No.
so that's cool. I did a flare test. I saw it's prone to flaring.
I caught flare when I
Yeah.
was shooting birds in
It's
flight.
kind of prone to flaring. I would always use like the hood, and I would be careful not pointing it directly because it's a very like tight angle of view. It's not a huge problem, but if you do have light coming in, like you're shooting into the sun, be careful. You know, it's problematic. In terms of vignetting, again, we did the test just before this, so I'll have the images on the screen. I don't think it's like, because it's a 5.6 lens, I don't think it came out like horribly. Like the vignette seems pretty okay. So that's that. Barrel distortion, I didn't see any barrel distortion. So that's pretty cool. And the bokeh is interesting. The bokeh, wide open. The bokeh is oval. I don't know. Do you see when you're shooting with the 600? How is the bokeh wide open?
On F4?
Yeah. It's oval or circular?
No, circular.
Circular? Okay. So here you have to close to about F8 to get like circular
circular
bokeh balls. But the shape of the out of focus area is kind of spiral. I don't know how to say it. You know what I'm talking about? Maybe I'll find an image and show it on the screen, but it's kind of nice. I like it. Some people don't, but I kind of like it.
The oval shape?
Yeah, the general like out of like focus. Yeah, it's kind of oval, but I don't know. I think it's nice. We took, both of us, I think, took some images, so I'll put them on the screen. Nothing too spectacular. I know. I have to look at what you shot, but mostly like birds. That's the most.
I did birds, and if you can add to the video, try to see if you find the fox. The fox image. Yeah,
it's in focus.
The fox and the crow. Yeah, I shot a burst. I had one.
So 1 or 2 were in focus.
I had one in focus.
No, so I'll try and put them in the frame. So let's conclude this. What do you think about this lens?
So, like I said, as far as the build, size, weight, everything, this is a lens I would definitely recommend to one of my students that want to get into telephoto lenses because of the price, size, and accuracy.
Yeah. And weight. I think that for me, the weight like is maybe the biggest like factor in this lens.
So I did say weight. With the notice that in very low light situations and small subjects,
it's not necessarily ideal.
I mean, you're not going to miss your burst, but your heat rate will be lower.
Yeah.
But on anything else that I saw in shot, people, cars, all these things I didn't miss any shot. So that's a high heat rate.
Yeah.
So overall, my conclusion is that it's a good lens. It's a good lens for what it is, for the price. I wouldn't compare it to the
600
600
or
millimeter or the
400, yeah.
400 f2.8. Not of Nikon, not of Canon, and not of Sony. It's just a different line.
Yeah, it's maybe comparable
Um,
to the 500 or now the 600 f6.3, the PF line, the
yeah,
Nikon
maybe
PF.
you can put it in par with the PF line. I'm also not sure,
I
but
didn't test them, and we need, it's completely different system, so
it's
it's
also
difficult. Yeah.
yeah. But overall, it's for what it made. I think it's good. It's good
Yeah.
for sport. It's good for wildlife. I think it's more for sports than wildlife anyway. Um, I am going to horse reining competition
Okay.
on June 6th.
Okay.
So if you'll still have it, I can take it over there and try to take some
We will
photos of
see if we can
horses.
keep it until then.
Yeah.
That can be nice. My thoughts are pretty much the same. For me, I'm still not sure. As I'm in, my occupation, my work is not in bird photography. It's a hobby,
Mhm.
so I can't afford, and probably even if I can, I don't like to carry the big 600
Mhm.
Sony. So I'm still, thinking whether or not Sony will ever come up with something comparable to this. I don't know.
Oh no.
Yeah, it might interfere with their own line of like high-end lenses, might not, I know. But I think that for a lot of users, this is going to be a fantastic option.
Yeah.
And in terms of pricing, we didn't mention the price. This is selling for $3,000.
Yeah.
So I think that at
Significant.
the moment, this is one of at least the new lenses, the most expensive lens that Sigma is selling.
Mhm.
But if you compare it to most, I would say, like high-end lenses, your 600 is like $14,000.
Yeah, like I said, they're
Even
not
the
in par.
even the 300 is like $6,000. If you take the extender, it's like a
Yeah,
little bit more. So
they're not in
yeah,
par.
so
I'm
it's more expensive than the 100 to 400, maybe
slightly, and the Canon
slightly. With an
100
extender, it's getting close.
and the Canon 100 to 500 RF.
Yeah. So yeah, that's more or less the pricing. So that is everything that we have for you. Go check out the full review with all of the test results, and don't forget to subscribe. Matan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ida.
Have a nice flight. Matan is going to
Gambia.
Gambia.
I'm
Is going
flying to
to shoot
Gambia.
some interesting things there,
Uh,
and come back to us, and we'll do more video talks.
for sure. I
Okay.
love being here.
Thank you and goodbye.